I think that construction risk is the biggest thing that's on my mind when we look at not only new opportunities, but existing investments that we're in. Since builders have locked away a fixed price contract, there's been a very big escalation in price. And what that has meant is builders are wearing that risk as opposed to developers. So quite often we're seeing in the current market that builders are approaching developers and asking to share some of those costs. And so, I think from my perspective, what I want to see is builders continuing on that job. The worst thing that can happen is a builder falls over, is that they need to replace that builder, and there's massive cost escalation. So we're monitoring that very closely. From my perspective, what I like to know is that we're involved in those conversations, that we understand exactly where that's at, and that there's a solution at the back end. Look, to be honest, the builders have been fantastic. They're actually providing a lot more information. We're getting a lot more insight into builder financials and their ability to complete a project through to completion. The reality is our pipeline's pretty strong because people are moving away from banks. There's less opportunity to avail of bank funding. So it's creating a lot more. I often use the example that we're the first call compared to the banks. So what we're seeing is, again, that flight to quality, where development does stack up, we will get the call. So our pipeline's actually grown despite the fact that the universe of developments has shrunk. I've never seen the market so uniform in the fact that there is definitely blue sky ahead. There's definitely an undersupply. The market is completely agreed on that fact, but it is getting to how we get to that point.
We're just starting to see our inquiry come back from investors for the apartment product, which I think will in turn create activity in that apartment space. Over the last 18 months, the regulations, supply chain, time constraints, and then you add the factor that your development costs in terms of funding has gone up. It's moved at 50%.
I think looking ahead for the next sort of 12 to 18 months or 24 months and what the headwinds may or may not be, the growth outlook is very strong at the moment. Demand is higher than it's ever been. But the main issue is there's some real supply constraints, both in the inner ring and the outer ring. There's a lot of government planning issues, there's infrastructure planning issues, and we don't see demand sort of tailing off or softening for some time for the next 2 or 3 years, and there's just not any supply that's likely to come into the market. I think there's probably a number of elements. I think the first of those is a much more efficient planning system and delivery of infrastructure. Secondly, the only other main supply that can come on in the inner rings is multi-storey warehousing. Land values need to lift to a certain rate to enable that to become economic. They're probably 70% of the way there at the moment, but until land growth is at a level that's high enough, the multi-storey supply can't come on, but when it does, it will ease that sort of burden. I think one of the main key takeaways, and we're seeing a little bit ourselves, but it was good to hear others speak about, was the stabilisation of construction pricing. The growth and the sort of weekly growth that we were seeing before, there's a lot more confidence that in terms of forecasting looking forward, people have got a bit more comfort. And I think the second one, which is quite different to our sector at the moment, was just the nuance of the constrained nature of the Western Sydney sort of land market. And the ability to sort of generate sort of profits or a niche market in terms of being a land developer out there versus a number of others that are actually developing apartments.
I think particularly for us at the moment, there's a really strong narrative in Australia, across Australia, around supply and demand in the residential space. Now, whether that relates to apartment living, whether that relates to house and land, whether that relates to a student accommodation, I think that space is one that I think everyone recognises is going to be highly undersupplied, with net migration where it's forecast to come in. So that's certainly of interest, and I think the other key one for us is the industrial space. That's certainly a space where we have a lot of track record, a lot of experience. We know that space well. We know the complexities around that space, and I think the fundamental tailwinds that underpin the industrial market that have made it the darling of the Australian real estate sector for so long are still there, right? It's underpinned by real rental growth, underpinned by vacancy in sub-markets of literally sub 1%.
I think it's increasingly difficult because a lot of the inputs, there's a lot of unknowns. So we're seeing there's construction risk, we're seeing planning risk, we're seeing end sales risk, and in addition to that, we're seeing difficulties in in-ground risk, which is becoming inherently difficult to quantify. And especially with the labour shortages that we're seeing and the raise in prices, it's just making a lot of feasibilities not stack up at the moment.
Obviously construction costs are the main item that kind of comes into play, but I think more broadly it's this sense of change. Change in the way that we value office assets, change in the way that we procure builders, change in the way that we address housing supply issues. So we're in a real period of kind of dislocation, and that's interesting, it's opportunity, but it's also risk. Being nimble right now, being agile, being reactive, but also being proactive about the plays that you make is going to be the defining factor, I think, of the next couple of years.